Peter was out for his morning walk as a volunteer park ranger when he saw something moving in the distance. He knew he had to be careful. Predators had been reported in the area, so he moved closer to see if it was a bear or a coyote. Then something else caught his attention. He saw the black bear, and he was ready to run. But the bear was carrying a child. Peter turned pale. He had never seen anything like this before. He had to make sure the baby was okay, but there was a big problem. The problem was the bear, a bear that was too big for him to handle on his own, and a bear with a baby even more so. And the bear seemed like it would refuse to let go of the child. Peter decided to take a slow approach, and all sorts of questions and concerns came to mind. He had no idea what the bear was doing with the baby. He had no time to waste, but he had to be careful. If the bear got angry, the child could get seriously hurt, and so could Peter. The only two good things Peter could think of were that the bear didn't seem aggressive and hadn't hurt the baby yet. Peter decided to take matters into his own hands. He slowly approached the bear from behind. The bear had just placed the baby on the ground. This could be his chance to get the baby to safety. Peter knew things could end badly if he made a wrong move. Then the bear turned around. First, Peter thought the bear hadn't noticed him, but then he saw its attitude change. That was not good at all. Peter felt his heart bounce in his chest. He had never felt so afraid. Peter was in an intense exchange of glances with the bear. Thanks to his experience as a ranger, he knew not to make any sudden movements. He had to remain completely still. One wrong move, and it could have been the end of him, and probably the baby too. Peter had a can of bear spray on his belt, but he knew the bear would be upon him before he could draw it, never mind spray it. Then the bear reacted and grabbed the baby, instead of pouncing on it. It lifted it up almost gently by the back of its romper suit, so again it wasn't hurt. But how long could Peter's and the baby's good fortune last? They ran away quickly from Peter, and Peter tried to see where they were going. But it was too fast. As a ranger, he knew bears running are almost as fast as horses. He had to quickly inform his fellow rangers to prepare a rescue team for the boy. But there was a problem. His fellow rangers didn't believe Peter at all. Peter had a reputation as a prankster, and a bear baby call was just the sort of shenanigans they would expect of him. Peter was desperate for help, but he didn't seem to want to give up. He insisted that he had seen the bear with a child. Peter decided to take matters into his own hands. He had to call the police, even though his fellow rangers had told him to let it go. They all thought Peter had gone crazy or had taken a joke too far. Peter refused to listen to them. He had told the police what was going on with the first officers on the scene. They arrived within minutes with the professional park rangers, and they took Peter's call very seriously. More reinforcements would soon arrive. Then Peter's volunteer ranger boss told the police officers to go into his office. When they came out, they ignored Peter and went straight into the woods. More police officers quickly arrived. They told Peter not to move, and they looked pretty angry. Peter had no idea what was going on or what his boss had told these officers. Was it about his occasional pranks he thought were mostly harmless? When Peter confronted him, he was told to sit down and wait. He would soon be questioned. Peter was confused. The officers returned after a few minutes. Peter was surprised. They certainly hadn't scoured the entire forest in minutes. Something else must have happened. Peter would soon have the answers. Peter was questioned about the bear he had supposedly seen. He was also asked about the baby. Peter knew what he had seen, and no one seemed to take him seriously. He had to get to the bottom of it. The police told Peter that they would be leaving soon and that they didn't find it funny. Peter burst into tears. Peter had been forbidden to leave the office, but his boss still wanted to talk to him because of all the stress he was experiencing. Peter had become very emotional. He burst into tears, asking his boss to go get the baby. But there was something else that would upset Peter even more. Peter had been suspended. His boss told him he could no longer work as a volunteer forest ranger. Peter felt the world was against him. His boss and his fellow volunteer rangers and the professional rangers believed that something really horrible was happening to Peter, that he was no longer just carrying out pranks. Now he saw things because of traumatic events in his life. Peter had previously been in the Army and had been discharged on medical grounds. He had seen some horrible things, and they gave him nightmares. It was why he became a volunteer park ranger, so he could wear a uniform, help people, and be at peace in the park amongst nature. They tried to convince Peter to go to therapy and maybe get admitted to a psychiatric hospital. He had just lost a baby, and his wife had left him because he had carried out a silly prank. He did this sort of thing to help him cope with all the stress he was feeling. She loved him, but his love of silly jokes and inability to talk had ended up being too much for her. For this reason, no one believed him, although they felt sorry for him. Financially, Peter didn't need the joke. His Army disability pension took care of that. But emotionally, wearing a uniform really helped Peter feel useful, and that was for him the most important thing. His colleagues thought the trauma was still fresh and that he was imagining a bear with his baby, the baby he had lost when his wife left him. Peter told them that this was not the case, but nobody believed him. They just pitied him and thought the bear baby story was a sick joke and a waste of the police's and professional rangers' time, a step too far. Peter had a desperate plan to solve everything. Peter would go into the woods on his own. Peter was determined to find out the truth. In truth, the thing that worried Peter the most was how long a baby could live with a bear. Could a bear even feed a baby, never mind resisting eating it? He wanted to rescue that baby, but chances were he was looking for a corpse. Peter was no longer allowed to enter the forest, but he didn't care. The forest was huge, the size of a small European country, and it wasn't guarded. Who would try and steal a forest or maybe kidnap a bear? The patrols of volunteer and professional rangers were mostly on the lookout for lost hikers, poachers, and hunters out of season. The welfare of the child was the only thing on his mind. His neighbor tried to stop him, but she knew it was useless. Peter went into the forest anyway. He felt naked without his uniform or radio, but he did bring a can of bear spray, just in case, with him. Peter decided to go to the forest early in the morning. It was still less than 24 hours since his encounter with the bear. He would have gone earlier, but searching the woods by night on his own would have been pointless. He also knew that at that time no one would be guarding the edge of the forest, so he could go in without any problems. He only had one more thing to do before he could leave. He went to see his best friend Jacob, a fellow volunteer ranger. He was surprised to see Peter. He had heard what had happened. Peter explained the whole story to him. They had to get to the forest to save the boy. Jacob was skeptical. He didn't want to participate. Then Peter relented. Jacob had never seen Peter in this state. He was very reluctant to go, but he felt he had no choice. He secretly wasn't looking for a bear or a baby. He decided he had to keep an eye on his friend. Maybe Peter would hurt himself. Jacob told Peter that he would go with him. This decision could potentially be disastrous for him, as he knew Peter was barred from the woods and possibly was facing being locked up involuntarily due to his mental state. In fact, Jacob, fearing that Peter might actually have killed the baby, decided to subtly carry a pistol with him, just in case he needed to put Peter out of his own misery if he had done something awful. Peter kept talking about the boy and the bear as they went deeper into the forest. Jacob was thinking that Peter had become completely delusional and smiled, nodded, and contemplated what might need to be done. He felt the urge to call for help, but something prevented him from doing so when they finally reached the place where Peter had seen the bear. Jacob noticed something Peter had missed. Jacob noticed tracks in the distance, bear tracks, and also bear poop, fresh bear poop. He was immediately intrigued by what he had found. He had heard of bears in the area, but this was definitely something bigger than normal. Perhaps it was a mighty grizzly, not the usual small black bear. In fact, they had found black bear tracks, but a bigger-than-average black bear. Jacob began to believe that Peter had at least seen the bear, but he still had doubts about the baby. Now that both Jacob and Peter agreed, they knew they had to be careful. The black bear was no joke, and if he had kept a human child with him, who knows what he was capable of doing or how smart he was. Jacob shouted to Peter that he had found more tracks after following the bear's trail. Jacob suddenly lost the track. He had no idea where the bear might have gone. He was completely lost. It could not have vanished into thin air. Peter looked around. He was getting more and more desperate. It couldn't have vanished. Then they both heard a roar. Jacob froze. It was very close. Peter was now sure that they were in bear territory. The bear had probably smelled the two men, even if it wasn't the bear with the baby. It was a big danger to them. The bear had to be very careful. Peter started to walk toward the noise, then Jacob pulled him back. Peter looked Jacob straight in the face, and he looked truly terrified. Jacob didn't want to go near the bear. He urged Peter to call for backup, but Peter refused. Besides, he had no radio. They had all let him down already and taken his radio and hope, so why would he trust them now? Jacob really wanted to go back. He had heard the noises in the distance. It was as if the bear was slowly approaching them. Then it would charge them too fast for them to run away. Jacob told Peter he would not go with him, but Peter had no intention of turning back. Peter finally convinced Jacob to stay close to him. Two strong men were less likely to be attacked. Neither of them had tranquilizer guns with them, so they were not able to sedate the bear when they saw it. Someone would have to distract it. Jacob reluctantly followed Peter. Peter was convinced that they were close now. He was already feeling a lot of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had to snatch the boy from the bear. There was no turning back. It was the only thing on his mind. Then Jacob gasped. They saw a cave in the distance. It was certainly no ordinary cave. They followed the bear's tracks and went straight into the cave. It was definitely a bear lair. Peter tried to move forward slowly, then suddenly he froze. Peter saw the bear in the distance, and he was completely shocked. He knew he had not gone crazy, even though Jacob was now fully convinced and was even more frightened than before. This was totally out of his comfort zone. They shouldn't be there. There was no trace of the child. Jacob tried to convince Peter to go back to the ranger's office to make sure they could help too. But Peter was extremely stubborn. He felt he had to try something, but he still had to locate the baby when he heard a noise. Suddenly they heard cries from within the cave, and the bear seemed to react. And when a few moments later he came out and the crying stopped, Peter now knew for sure that the boy was inside the cave. Then the bear turned its head toward Jacob. Jacob was seen by the bear. The situation was very tense. Jacob did not know how to react. Peter told Jacob to stay still, but Jacob was so scared that he started to walk back. At that moment, the bear reacted and charged rapidly towards Jacob. Peter tried to distract the bear, but it seemed interested only in Jacob, who had no choice but to get away as quickly as possible. It was a life-threatening situation. Jacob ran away as fast as he could. He felt the bear approaching, the worst. Jacob stumbled. He immediately got to his feet and climbed a tree. The bear tried to pull Jacob down from the tree, but it seemed that Jacob managed to get to safety. This was the moment when Peter reacted and ran into the cave. Peter was alone. He saw a clear path to the back of the cave. He heard Jacob shouting in the distance, but he felt it was more important to rescue the baby and that Jacob was okay. As he walked slowly through the cave, he heard Jacob yell that the bear would be back. Peter had no time to waste. He had to get deeper into the cave immediately. Without thinking, he started running down the cave entrance. He didn't hear the bear nearby, so he knew he had some time to save the baby. When Peter reached the cave, it was pitch black inside. Peter quickly pulled his phone out of his pocket to get some light. He didn't know where to go. Then suddenly he heard a noise coming from the bottom of the cave. He started to walk towards it. Then he saw something that shocked him to his core. Finally, he saw the child. Peter quickly ran to the baby. At first glance, he seemed unharmed. Peter was relieved and proud, but then he realized that he had to get out of the cave as soon as possible. He had no time to waste, and he heard noises in the distance. Peter realized that the bear was returning, and he quickly turned off his torch as he heard the bear walking into the cave. Peter thought the bear had noticed the baby was gone. Then the baby suddenly began to cry. Peter tried to calm the baby down, but it was too late. Peter noticed that the bear had seen him switch off the light. He looked the bear straight in its face. Peter was now cornered and was still holding the baby in his arms. Peter carefully reached for his can of bear spray, but he knew in this enclosed cave it would hit him, the bear, and even the baby. The bear seemed to be very cautious as it approached Peter. Then Peter heard more noises. Suddenly the bear seemed to keel over and fall asleep. Peter realized that the bear was hit by sedative darts that were sticking out of its rump. Then he heard a lot of noises all around him. Without realizing it, other rangers started running into the cave to save Peter. Jacob had called them on his mobile phone. He had been able to get a signal up the tree. The police and rangers had no idea where the parents of the baby were, or even who they were. The police had not reported the boy missing. The rangers took the boy to the nearest hospital. With the help of the police, Peter received an apology. But he was determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. Soon they would find out everything. The boy was checked at the hospital immediately upon arrival. A group of doctors took the boy for an inspection. Peter refused to let the child out of his sight, and the police allowed Peter to stay with the child. They also took a DNA sample to identify the child. After many checks, it appeared that the child was healthy. Every hour, Peter checked to see if the lab results were done. There he learned that the bear had also been brought in for inspection. It would spend the rest of its life in a zoo, just like prison for bad animals. Though Peter hadn't slept for 24 hours, when he finally got the news, it was not the news he had expected. The bear was left back in the forest, and when Peter asked why, the answer was most surprising. The baby's parents had been found, but tragically in the hospital morgue. They had died in a fatal car accident after running into a tree in the forest. The bear had found and rescued the baby as best it could, feeding it chewed-up berries and bugs. The baby was in surprisingly good condition. Peter was glad to hear the bear was innocent. He was reinstated, but now as a professional forest ranger, and he asked if he could adopt the baby.